below the knee. My name is Barbara, and to say that life has been good to me would be an understatement. At 23, I've already achieved what some people spend a lifetime striving for: a fulfilling career, meaningful friendships, and a clear sense of direction. Not to gloat, but I'm the head of sales at Everline Corp, a high-flying company with operations across multiple countries. It's an intense, high-stakes job, but I absolutely love it. Every morning, I wake up eager to face the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. I remember my first day at Everline like it was yesterday. I was a fresh-faced college graduate dressed in my most professional outfit, a blazer and pencil skirt that I had splurged on, eager to make a good impression. My boss at the time, Sarah, welcomed me warmly. "Barbara, we've heard a lot of good things about you. Welcome to the team," she said, extending her hand for a firm handshake. "Thank you, Sarah. I'm really excited to be here," I replied, my voice tinged with both enthusiasm and nervousness. Fast forward a few years, and not only did I surpass my own expectations, but I also became the youngest head of sales in the history of the company. When I was promoted, Sarah came to my new office with a grin that was almost as big as mine. "You've earned every bit of this, Barbara. We're so proud to have you lead the team," she declared. "It's a dream come true, honestly," I said, barely able to contain my excitement. "I can't wait to push Everline to new heights." But my journey to the top wasn't just about sales targets and revenue growth. It was also about the people who became part of my life along the way. One person, in particular, stood out: Jason. Jason was a sales associate who joined Everline a year after I did. We clicked instantly. His cubicle was right next to mine, and our friendship grew from casual office banter to a genuine bond. We shared sales tips, celebrated each other's victories, and even suffered through tough quarters together. "You killed that presentation, Barbara," he'd exclaim after a particularly successful meeting with clients. "And you were brilliant in the QA session," I'd respond. "Seriously, Jason, where'd you learn to handle objections like that?" "From watching you," he'd say with a wink. We were a dynamic duo, and I valued our friendship deeply. It's rare to find someone you can both work with effectively and genuinely like as a person. That's why, when he invited me to his sister's wedding, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to celebrate not just his family's joy, but also our friendship. Little did I know that this event would reveal the cracks in the facade, shattering my perception of someone I had considered a close friend. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's a story for another chapter. For now, I'll say this: life was good. I had a job I loved, a friend I trusted, and a future that seemed as bright as ever. If someone had told me how quickly things could unravel, I might not have believed them. But sometimes, life has a way of showing us that not everything is as perfect as it seems, teaching us lessons we didn't know we needed to learn. A regular Tuesday morning in the office turned extraordinary when Jason swung by my desk, a big grin spreading across his face. His eyes were practically glowing, a look that I had come to associate with good news or a successful deal. "Barbara, can I borrow you for a sec?" he asked, his voice filled with an eager excitement. "Sure, what's up?" I said, minimizing the spreadsheet I had been engrossed in. Jason took a deep breath, his grin widening. "So, my sister's getting married this weekend? It's kind of a big deal, family from all over are flying in. Would you be interested in coming? I think it'll be a lot of fun, and it would mean a lot to me." I looked up from my screen, caught a little off guard, but pleasantly surprised. Weddings are special, a celebration of love and unity, and to be invited to one felt like an honor. Plus, this was Jason, my work buddy, my confidant in all things sales and streaming series. This was a no-brainer. "Wow, Jason! Thank you for inviting me," I exclaimed, genuinely touched by the gesture. "I'd love to be there." Jason's face broke into an even bigger smile, if that was possible. "Fantastic! My sister will be thrilled to have you there. She's heard so much about you. Feels like you're already part of the family." This made me chuckle. "Well, I'm honored. What's the dress code? Don't want to show up underdressed or anything." Jason laughed. "Oh, you know weddings. Everyone's an unofficial contestant in a fashion show. But semi-formal should do it. My sister's not the super traditional kind." I made a mental note to go dress shopping after work. Got it semi-formal. Anything else I should know? He paused, as if contemplating whether to say more, then shrugged it off. "Just be prepared for some boisterous relatives and a whole lot of dancing." Dancing, you say? You're on! We both laughed, sealing the plan that promised a weekend of fun and celebration. As Jason walked away, a sense of warmth washed over me. Here was a friendship that felt as effortless as it was meaningful, a person I could share the highs and lows of life with both at work and outside of it. I returned to my spreadsheet, but couldn't focus right away. My mind kept drifting back to the wedding invitation. In hindsight, perhaps I should have read more into Jason's pause, pondered why he seemed to hesitate. But hindsight is 20/20, and at that moment, life was simply too good to question. I went back to crunching numbers and planning sales strategies, blissfully unaware that this wedding would be the backdrop against which all my illusions would come crashing down. It would turn out to be an event that tested not just my patience, but my very perception of friendship and loyalty. But for now, I was happy, excited, and completely in the dark about the storm that was brewing. Isn't it funny how life sets you up sometimes? One moment you're on cloud nine, believing that you've got everything figured out, and the next you're plummeting back to earth, a fallen Icarus with burnt wings. But let's not get ahead of the story. The descent comes later. For now, the sky was clear, and I was soaring. The day of the wedding arrived with much anticipation. I had spent hours shopping for the perfect semi-formal dress, a delicate balance of elegance and understatement. It was a lovely off-shoulder gown that hit just below the knee, simple yet sophisticated. I felt confident and excited as I stepped into the opulent ballroom where the wedding was being held. Jason greeted me as I walked in, his face lighting up at the sight of me. "Barbara, you made it! You look fantastic!" "Thank you, Jason. This place looks incredible, and you clean up pretty well yourself," I replied, gesturing to his well-tailored suit. He chuckled. "Well, weddings are a good excuse to look fancy. Come on, let me introduce you to some people." As we mingled with the crowd, I couldn't help but feel like I was part of something special. Jason's family was warm and inviting, and it seemed like I had been seamlessly integrated into the celebration. That feeling, however, was about to be short-lived. We finally got to a table where a woman was sitting, her eyes scanning the room with an air of detachment. This was Melissa, Jason's wife. I had heard about her, but we'd never met. As Jason introduced us, I extended my hand. "Nice to finally meet you, Melissa. Jason speaks highly of you." Melissa took my hand briefly, her grip tepid at best. "Yes, well, he's mentioned you too." A chill ran through me. Her tone was colder than her handshake, but I brushed it off, chalking it up to wedding jitters or some kind of stress. We took our seats, and the ceremony was beautiful. I felt myself getting caught up in the romantic atmosphere, the exchanging of vows, and the promise of eternal love. Then came the reception, and with it, the unveiling of a far less pleasant side of my work. Friend's life. As dinner was served and small talk flowed around the tables, Melissa leaned over and said, "I don't know how they do things where you're from, Barbara, but in our circle, we don't typically wear dresses like that." I looked down at my carefully selected outfit, then back at Melissa, stunned. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I didn't mean to offend anyone." But she didn't stop there. "It's not just the dress, dear. It's your entire demeanor. You're carrying yourself as if you're the guest of honor." I glanced at Jason, who was seated right next to Melissa. He was avoiding eye contact, his gaze fixated on his dinner plate as if it held the secrets to the universe. The weight of what was happening started to sink in. Here I was, at a celebration of love and unity, being singled out and demeaned. The worst part, Jason, the very person who had invited me into this setting, the person who had trusted as a friend, was letting it happen. I clenched my napkin under the table, struggling to maintain my composure. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Melissa. It was not my intention to come across as disrespectful." For a moment, she looked as if she might say more, but she turned her attention back to her meal, leaving me to stew in my own discomfort and rising indignation. It became abundantly clear that I was no longer welcome, not just at this table, but in this chapter of my life that involved Jason. My so-called friend had let me walk into an emotional ambush and did nothing to intervene. Feeling a potent mix of humiliation and betrayal, I decided that I had had enough. Quietly excusing myself, I left the wedding, not looking back, even as my heels clicked faster with each step away from the gathering. As I drove home, I felt a bitter taste in my mouth, a mixture of disappointment and a sense of profound loss. I had lost not just an evening to awkwardness and insult, but possibly a friendship that I had genuinely valued. And as I navigated the winding roads that led me back to my own reality, I couldn't help but wonder, was this friendship ever real to begin with? Little did I know, the unraveling had only just begun. The fallout from the wedding weighed heavily on me over the next couple of days. I couldn't shake off the sense of betrayal and disrespect, a haze that darkened everything, even the bright fluorescent lights of my office. I got into work, booted up my computer, and tried to immerse myself in sales reports and client emails, but my thoughts kept returning to that night. It was then that my phone buzzed, snapping me back to reality. A text message from Jason popped up on the screen. "Hey Barbara, can we talk?" I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. A part of me wanted to ignore the message, to cut my losses and move on, but another part wanted closure, an explanation for why he allowed his wife to treat me the way she did. With a sigh, I typed back, "Sure, what's on your mind?" Within seconds, his reply appeared. "I'm really sorry about what happened at the wedding. I should have stepped in. I feel terrible." My eyes narrowed at the screen. An apology was a good start, but it was too little, too late. If he had stepped in at the moment, as he should have, we wouldn't be in this mess. Deciding that a text conversation wouldn't suffice for this kind of dialogue, I summoned him to my office later that day. When he walked in, the confident, cheerful Jason I knew seemed replaced by a subdued, almost pitiable figure. "Please, have a seat," I gestured to the chair across my desk. "Barbara, he began, but I cut him off. "Save it. Your text said you're sorry, but I'd like to know. Sorry for what, exactly? For the way your wife treated me or for the fact that you sat there and did nothing?" Jason lowered his eyes, both. "I should have done something, said something. I didn't handle it well, and I regret it." "You regret it?" I couldn't help but raise my voice, my patience waning. "Regret doesn't erase humiliation, Jason. It doesn't rebuild broken trust." "I know, and there's nothing I can do to change what happened, but I'm hoping we can move past this," he pleaded. I looked at him, my eyes narrowing. "Move past this. You let your wife insult me for nearly 2 hours. You invited me to a family event and allowed me to be disrespected. This isn't something we can just move past." "Barbara, you have to understand," he sighed deeply. "Melissa can be insecure and—" "Insecure?" I interrupted again, incredulous. "Your wife's insecurities don't give either of you the right to demean me. That's not how friendships work. That's not how decent human beings treat each other." Jason seemed to deflate entirely. His eyes clouded with regret. But for me, regret was no longer enough. "I'm sorry, but this isn't just about a spoiled evening or an awkward social fox pass, Jason. This is about integrity, loyalty, and respect. You showed none of those things that night, and you can't text those back into existence." He nodded, his eyes avoiding mine. "I understand. I messed up, big time, and I'll have to live with that." "Yes, you will," I affirmed, my voice tinged with finality. "As far as our professional relationship is concerned, consider yourself on thin ice. I expect nothing short of impeccable behavior and performance from you moving forward." "Understood," he said, standing up to leave. As he walked out, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow for a friendship lost. But there was also a newfound sense of clarity and resolve. This was more than just an uncomfortable dinner or an embarrassing scene. It was an unveiling of character, or lack thereof. And while his apology might have been a step toward atonement, it did nothing to rebuild the trust that was shattered that night. The empty words hung in the air long after he left, a ghost of what our friendship used to be. But some ghosts are better left uninvited. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Jason and me simmered beneath the professional facade we both maintained. While I did my best to put the episode behind me, focusing on my duties as head of sales, I noticed his performance began to decline. Deadlines were missed, and client follow-ups lagged. It was as though the breakdown in our personal relationship had seeped into his professional life, affecting his capability to do his job well. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, attributing his lackluster work to personal stress, maybe stemming from his marriage. But the kindness was met with more negligence on his part, almost as if he was daring me to fire him. I had reached my limit. One morning, I decided it was time for another face-to-face meeting. I emailed him. "Jason, please come to my office at 2 p.m. We need to discuss your recent performance." Promptly at 2, Jason knocked on my office door. "Come in," I called out, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. Jason entered, his eyes downcast as he took a seat. I steeled myself, looking him squarely in the eyes. "Jason, we need to talk about your recent performance. It's not up to the mark. You've been missing deadlines and dropping the ball on major accounts. What's going on?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've had a lot on my mind recently. I know that's no excuse, but I can improve." "A lot on your mind? We all have personal issues, Jason, but they shouldn't spill into our work. Certainly not to this extent," I retorted. Jason was silent, unable to come up with a defense. "As much as it pains me to do this," I began, pulling up his employment file on my computer, "effective immediately, you're terminated from your position." Jason's eyes widened in disbelief. "Is this because of the wedding?" "In part, yes," I replied, "but more importantly, it's because you've not been performing your duties well. If you remember, you were already on thin ice." He looked shattered, the weight of the situation finally dawning on him. "So, that's it then. You're just going to fire me?" "I've given you ample opportunities to prove that you're more than the mistake you made at the wedding. But you've consistently shown me that you're not," I said, my voice tinged with disappointment more than anger. "I can't have someone on my team who I can't rely on, personally or professionally." He sighed, a mixture of remorse and resignation washing over his face. "I understand, Barbara. I've messed up, and this is the consequence. I never wanted it to come to this." "I didn't want this either, Jason," I said, genuinely sad to see how far we'd fallen. "But you've left me with no other option. You'll need to hand over all pending work to Sarah by the end of the day. Har will guide you through the exit process." Jason stood up, his chair scraping softly against the floor. "I guess this is goodbye then." "Goodbye, Jason," I replied, not unkindly, as he walked out of my office and, effectively, out of my life. After he left, I sat there for a few moments, contemplating the complexity of human relationships. How someone could go from being a trusted friend to a glaring example of disloyalty and professional inadequacy was beyond me. Yet here I was, facing the fallout and cleaning up the mess. As I turned my attention back to my work, a sense of sadness mingled with relief washed over me. It was the end of an era, yes, but perhaps it was also the beginning of a chapter where trust and integrity took center stage. In that moment, I promised myself that, moving forward, I'd be even more cautious about who I let into my life, both professionally and personally, because the lines between the two weren't just blurred, they were deeply intertwined, capable of making or breaking you in more ways than one. My weekend had been rather uneventful. I'd spent the day catching up on chores, indulging in some Netflix, and basically doing everything I could to take my mind off the recent upheavals at work. The Jason saga felt like a distant memory, albeit one that still had a few lingering threads. I was just settling into my cozy reading nook with a cup of tea when a knock echoed at my door. It was odd for someone to visit unannounced, but perhaps it was just a package delivery or a neighbor. I got up and opened the door, and there, standing on my doorstep, was Melissa, Jason's wife. For a moment, time froze. Her presence was the last thing I expected, and my immediate reaction was one of disbelief. What could she possibly want? "May I come in?" she asked hesitantly, her voice a stark contrast to the accusing tone she had used at the wedding. Reluctantly, I stepped aside to let her enter. "What brings you here, Melissa?" She took a deep breath, clearly nervous. "I came to apologize, Barbara. I've had some time to think, and I realized how horribly wrong I was to treat you the way I did." I eyed her skeptically. "That's rich, coming from you. What's the catch, trying to get Jason his job back?" "No," she shook her head vehemently. "This isn't about Jason's job. This is about me making amends. I was terribly, unforgivably wrong, and I see that now." "So, you've suddenly had an epiphany?" I asked, my tone laced with incredulity. "I've had a reality check," she corrected. "Jason told me he got fired and why. And while I initially blamed you, it made me look at myself and the role I played in this whole mess." "Interesting," I said, taking a sip of my tea. "So you now understand that your petty jealousy and lack of manners have consequences?" "Yes," she nodded, swallowing hard, and I can't undo the past. but I am truly sorry for the way I behaved and for putting Jason in that position." I stared at her, gauging the sincerity in her eyes. They seemed genuine, filled with regret and a newfound humility. Apology accepted, I finally said, breaking the silence that had enveloped the room. A look of relief washed over her face. "Thank you, Barbara. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but it means a lot." "Your apology is accepted, Melissa, but understand this. Jason isn't getting his job back, not because of what happened at the wedding, but because he wasn't doing it well." She nodded. "I understand. He's owned up to that too. We both have a lot of growing to do, it seems." "Yes, we all do," I agreed, "but some more urgently than others." With that, Melissa took her leave, thanking me again for giving her a chance to apologize. As I closed the door behind her, a strange sense of closure washed over me. It wasn't the neatly wrapped-up ending you read about in fairy tales, but it was an ending nonetheless. A conclusion to a chapter of my life marred by betrayal, disappointment, and a glaring lack of integrity. As I sat back down in my reading nook, my tea now lukewarm but my spirits lifted, I realized that sometimes the universe gives you these messy chapters to help you appreciate the good ones even more. Not every villain gets their comeuppance in the way you'd expect, and not every friendship survives the trials of character and circumstance. But every experience, good or bad, teaches you something valuable. In forgiving Melissa, I wasn't just letting her off the hook. I was setting myself free from the burden of resentment and bitterness. She had shown me the kind of person I never wanted to be, and for that, I was grateful. That night, I went to bed with a clear conscience and a lighter heart, ready to tackle whatever new challenges and opportunities awaited me in the days to come. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was an ending, and sometimes that's all you can ask.